We're joined by Joke Rogal, the filmmaker behind Quarter Gold, a new 6-part Netflix series that takes us deep inside the U.S. men's basketball team and their journey to the Paris Olympics. Jake, again, thank you so much for joining us on Stream Beat and Miami Heat Beat Network. First off, I had the absolute pleasure of screening this early. By the time this interview goes up, it will be out. So we advise everybody to dive into this because they're going to love it. But I just had to say that I was completely locked in. The way that you balanced like the intensity of the games, which we felt as if it was going on in the real moment, plus those raw behind the scenes moments, it was absolutely beautiful. I wanted to ask you just how did this project all come together?
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's super nice of you. I work at a company called Words and Pictures, and my boss, the head of the company, Connor Schell, former head of ESPN, he was working on this before I joined the company. He was in with USA Basketball, in with the IOC. And so when I joined the company, we had worked on The Last Dance together, and he knew I liked basketball. He just felt like it would be a good project to work on. So he told me about it, and immediately I was just like, I'm in, like, yes. And we needed the deals to get done still. So he was working vigorously trying to get those things done. And really he was working all the way up until we started shooting on making sure all the parties involved were on the same page. There's a lot of people involved. It's like IOC, NBA, all the national countries, all the networks, I mean, everything. So it was just making sure everyone's on the same page. And when something feels right, it usually gets done. And this was something that just felt like it should be a project that was made. And so there was always faith it would get done, and it did.
Absolutely. So you mentioned The Last Dance. That actually brings me to something I wanted to bring up. Obviously, a huge cultural moment, even for people outside of sports. How did that affect the perspective that you had going into this project? Did it change any of the way that you wanted to tell it? And did you feel any type of pressure to somewhat meet that same moment?
Yeah, I think you always want to make the best thing you possibly can. And you are the project that you're working on at the moment. So like you try not to think about that stuff. But of course, like, yeah, I hope it's as successful as that. That's a high bar, and it'd be great. But I think The Last Dance was about nostalgia, and it was about like replicating how people felt in a moment, 20, 30 years ago. This was about like now and looking forward as to like what the game is. And so like, I think they're very different in that sense. What's applicable to both is the globality of it. Michael Jordan is arguably the most famous person in the world, and he's touched people all over the world. And I think that this doc has the globality potential because it does deal with so many different countries and so many different people. So like, I hope that the globality-ness of both, if that's even a word, are the similarities. But as far as how you're doing the project, they're pretty different because Last Dance was looking back, and this one is kind of, in a way, looking forward.
Right. So one of the producers on this documentary, I was blown away to see that Barack Obama was a producer. Casual name drop, by the way, just very cool to pop up on the phone. I have to ask, what was it like working with him as a producer? Did he give you notes? Did you at any point have to say like, sorry, Barrio, I can't take that one?
No.
Okay.
His company is Higher Ground, and Ethan Lewis led the charge there. I'm not just saying this is like a PR thing. They're such an awesome company. And Barack Obama is a hero of mine. So I got to interview the president. I got to chew with him a little bit. It was surreal. Like you're trying to be professional, but it's impossible not to be intimidated and also to take in the moment. So I would say it was an out-of-body experience, and I'm super grateful for it. And he made it comfortable because he probably knew that I was nervous, and everyone he meets is probably nervous. So he knows how to sound nervous people. And he was great. When it comes down to it, he's a basketball fan. Like he's
a hoop head. He really is.
You start talking to him, it's like he feels normal quickly. You forget like, oh my God, he's done amazing things. He's one of the greatest leaders in the history of humanity. But he's a basketball guy. He knows basketball. He just starts talking basketball, and it immediately calms you down. So he's great. He's awesome.
That's awesome. So going into the tournament, I'm sure you had some kind of idea of at least the major story arcs that you wanted to cover, or some people that you wanted to speak with. But how did that all change once you were actually there in the tournament? Did any of the initial concepts that you had just get thrown away, and it's like, hey, we have to run with this?
Yeah, I think like what we did was we prepared ourselves with research to make sure we were ready for things that might potentially happen. But what we wanted to do with this doc is authenticity is what we stress the most. So we never wanted a player to do something for us, or a team to kind of like have an event for us. It was like, let's just shoot whatever is happening. So when you have that mindset of like, let's just capture it, it takes some of the pressure off as far as the planning goes. But obviously, like, that the 4 teams that we're covering, we want them to go far. And in the research, certain characters come out that you're like, I want to talk to that guy because he's really interesting, like Nico Batum or Bogdan Bogdanovic, guys who not necessarily wouldn't like jump to your brain, but then you see them and you read about them and you're like, okay, that's an interesting person. So there's research that goes into it, but you try to keep your expectations at bay because you're just capturing what happened to keep the authenticity intact. And that was the mindset.
And to that point, was there any pushback from the teams in terms of access? Like, how difficult was that to kind of get yourself into the locker room? Because you got some incredible access.
Yeah, I think, we told the coaches, it was up to the coaches, the access that we had. The IOC said, here are the proper credentials. We can put you in the right spots, but you ultimately have to get buy-in from the team and the players and the coaches. So the coaches, we said, like, you can throw us out of the locker room anytime you want. This is your experience. Like, you want to be respectful. So you start out by asking small. You say, like, can I stand in that corner? They say yes, and you do a good job in that corner. And the next day you say, can I stand in those 2 corners? You do a good job in those 2 corners, and then you slowly start to gain access. So it's a trust thing, and you want to be respectful of their experience, but you also have things you need to capture. So it's just being a human, putting yourself in their shoes, and trying to stay out of their way as much as you can.
Absolutely. And to some of those smaller moments that had to be left on the cutting room floor, anything in particular that you were like, man, if I could do a director's cut, this would have absolutely made it?
Well, like, I'm not just saying this, but honestly, I think the best stuff is in there because the Olympics aren't a long tournament. We shot for 2 weeks. We did some work prior to that, but like the main shoot was a 2-week shoot. So like you're really getting what's happening on a daily basis there. So if we were shooting this for a year, I'm sure a lot more would have hit the floor, but this was a quick shoot. So you have to include everything you're shooting. So, we shot Greece qualifying for the Olympics, which was cool, seeing Giannis in the locker room and stuff. But by the time the show starts in episode 1, we quickly realized, you want to be at the Olympics. That's where the action is. So
right.
Include that. But no, I think we got the best stuff in there. I feel confident in that. Just building out the episodes based on the moments.
Well, you definitely, like I said earlier, you definitely feel the adrenaline of the tournament in every episode. And I think that's something that was not as easy to capture, especially, when all the time passes, and spoiler alert for actual hoop heads, you kind of know who wins at the end, but you still feel that, like, oh God, I hope they make it. So to that point, LeBron, KD, and Steph, I mean, we can't not talk about them. They are 3 absolute icons in the game. On the same team, this wasn't just about winning gold. It really felt like a defining moment in basketball history. As the one documenting it, did you feel the weight of covering something this big in real time? And to that point, did the players really understand this is a moment in time that will be remembered forever? And did they feel the weight of it?
I think that they felt the excitement of it. I don't know about the weight, because like I think they all were in pretty good moods the entire time. And I think when you agree to be in the Olympics, you're doing it, it's free. You're doing it because you love the sport and you love being a part of it. So like they're kind of in their nirvana there of like, this is basketball on an international stage. Like that's where they want to be. They're choosing to be there. So I think they felt the excitement and the joy in it. I'm not sure about the weight. Maybe Team France a little bit because it's the home country and maybe a little tighter.
I wanted to ask the juxtaposition. How did they feel as opposed to America? Because America comes in with their heads held high, thinking this is our tournament. But we saw that the international game is right there behind us.
Yeah, I think France, it's hard to say they didn't feel it. Like when you should have seen anytime they left where they were training, it was like media and people and like, in Paris, like a lot of these guys grew up there. So like the pressure was definitely heightened because they were in France, but they still had a good time and the chemistry is there. As far as like the weight of the responsibility of telling the story, no matter what you work on, like you're trying to make the best thing and the most accurate thing you possibly can. So like there's always pressure there. Even on a stage this big, like the focus is just let's make the most accurate and most compelling thing I possibly can. And the rest will fall into place.
Well, I can't stress it enough. You absolutely delivered. We know that we're going to wrap up here in a few minutes, but we're a Miami Heat-based network, so we have to ask you a couple Miami questions before you get out of here. Sure. Number one, Bam Adebayo, it was so nice to see him get, some actual publicity for once. Yeah. We feel like nobody knows that we have this gem down here. And it was so nice to actually give him a platform and to see him get exposed a little bit. Can you just give us a little bit of what it was like being around Eric Spoelstra, Bam Adebayo, any memorable moments with them? And you can, just between you and us, nobody will hear this, who is he recruiting? Because we need someone else.
I don't know who they were recruiting, but I can tell you that Bam he's an amazing guy. What put him on the radar kind of in our world was we were talking to Grant Hill about the team off camera, like just part of doing research after the interviews. You're kind of like just asking some questions that might help you and how they can put the team together. And he said Bam was one of the first guys they thought about when they put the team together. And I was like, that's interesting because of how much talent there is, and I know how great Bam is, but like when you think of like when you're naming the U.S. roster, you think like Steph, LeBron, KD, whatever. So to hear that was surprising. So then once you talk to him and you get to know him and you hear about his story, it was like such a no-brainer. He's an amazing player. He's an amazing guy. Everybody likes him. Every single person he meets, they like him, which is rare. So he was amazing to be around. Spoelstra was great. We kind of stayed out of his way because we wanted Kurt to sort of be the person who's granting access to the coaches, but they were not friendly. The Heat rep well. Dwayne Wade was awesome.
He was phenomenal.
Yeah, he's an awesome guy. He loves Miami. So yeah, I'd say the Heat represented very well during the show.
I really can't stress it enough. If you're a basketball fan, you're going to love it. But if you're a Miami Heat fan, I mean, we have been waiting for people to just talk about Bam Adebayo nationally. So this felt like it was so pleasant.
Yeah.
One more Bam question. Did you get anything with him and Asia Wilson?
No, we
okay.
respectfully let that be.
Okay.
One thing is it's these guys' experience too. It's not just about the doc. And so you're like, you want to make sure they're having a good time. This is their summer. They're in Paris. Like, you want to be respectful of that. So we did not do anything there.
For sure.
Yeah.
So just after this, because this is going to be a huge success for you, it has to be. It was so great. Do you want to continue with the sports documentary role? What do you have lined up as your next passion project?
I don't have a passion project. I'm taking it one at a time, but sports is what I love and what I know and what I grew up watching. And I'll never get tired of sports. I think it's the greatest thing in the world. So I'd be lucky to be able to continue to work on sports docs and just, one at a time. But sports are my favorite thing in the world. And if I'm not good enough to be an athlete. So I was like, what's the next thing I could do is like learn about sports and tell stories about sports. So yeah, I hope I can stay doing sports stuff as long as I possibly can because it's the greatest thing in the world.
Well, I'll tell you what, the one sports doc that the entire world is itching for, or at least South Florida, is the Big Three documentary. We know that Chris Bosh and D Wade recorded that entire summer from their perspective. There's a ton of unaired footage. Just saying, you were there with LeBron. If you need,
I would be happy to do that. That'd be awesome.
That would be a phenomenal story. My producer Frankie is also on the call, and I promised him that he would be able to get in at least one question before we get out of here. So, Frankie, please, if you don't mind, go ahead and give Jake your question.
What's up, Frankie? How are you, man?
I'm doing well, Jake. Thank you again for your time. We have a thing here on Stream Beat. We like to go your 3 movies, shows, documentaries, could be anything. You were stuck on a stranded island. What 3 projects, movies, whatever? It could be something you worked on, just your faves. What are you bringing?
I'd bring the Defiant Ones.
Okay.
The hip hop documentary. I would bring Jaws.
Jaws.
Nice.
Great.
Classic.
Favorite movies ever.
A stranded island, an interesting perspective.
I was going to say,
Definitely,
up
man.
the adrenaline a little
You gotta
bit.
you gotta keep the energy up. It's an adrenaline rush. So let's see. Defiant Ones, Jaws, and maybe White Lotus. I'm into that.
Okay.
Coming up soon.
Excellent.
That's popped in my head. Yeah, I'll go with those 3.
Great choices. And lastly, we like to go into our top 3 things. What are you watching? Anything currently that you like to give a shout out to?
I'm watching Severance right now, which is awesome. Apple's doing great stuff. I was just working so much that I watched Will and Harper. It was on Netflix. It's an awesome doc with Will Ferrell.
Excellent documentary. Yes.
So good. Watch that. And
Love is Blind. We're big Love is Blind fans, believe it or not.
Yeah, no, man. I'm just like, sometimes when you work all day watching footage, the last thing you want to do is turn the TV on. So like, I'm not kidding. I'll go home and I'll just sit in silence and just like stare at the wall sometimes. It's hard to answer that question right now.
No, you're good. Thank you again, Jake.
Well, Jake, we don't want to take up any more of your time. Again, we really appreciate you hopping on Stream Beat and Miami Heat Beat Network. Once again, please, Court of Gold on Netflix. It is out now. Go watch it. You're gonna love it. Jake, thank you again for your time. We really, really appreciate it.
No doubt. Thank you guys for having me. It was good talking to you.
Good talking to you.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
Peace.